Halloween is my favorite holiday. There's just something about the cooler weather combined with the fall leaves and night arriving earlier that just brings me joy. The fall season as a whole is synonymous with this notion of death as one season and its beauties comes to an end. Even if you look way back when, the Celtics believed that on October 31st, the dead spirits would return to Rome once more. Once fall begins, you could just feel the Halloween season in the air. And for a movie lover like me, there's no better excuse than to binge horror movies. Every October, I try to watch one a day, mixing familiar classics with new blood. Admittedly, in my post-graduation life, it's a sentiment that's easier said than done. But when I had zero responsibilities and not a care in the world, I had this daily tradition. Let me set the stage. The neighborhood is decorated with ghoulish imagery. Every corner is meant to evoke some shiver down your spine. It's already the perfect setting. Nonetheless, I would stay up extra late, and I mean really, really late. Like until everyone in the household was sound asleep and it's the early AMs. This sets the perfect ambience for watching a horror movie because it would be completely dark outside. Mixed with the fact that night provides this peaceful experience, I mean everyone is practically asleep, so there's rarely anything going on or anyone to interrupt the movie-going experience. Not to mention that I'm watching whatever movie by myself in complete darkness, which just adds to the frights. I'm telling you, try it at least once and you'll experience horror movies in a whole different way, even the ones you've seen before. One film that is a staple of my October festivities is John Carpenter's Halloween, which just so happens to be the movie that started this tradition for me. I consider Halloween one of the best horror movies ever made, and it was a big inspiration for my short film, The Monster with No Name. Halloween is a great horror movie for many reasons, but I believe it's at its most effective when the filmmakers implement suspense in order to build up the presence and horrors of its slasher, Michael Myers. Suspense is important in any story. It keeps the audience engaged in how the story is going to play out. In a sense, it allows for active viewership as the audience is asking one important question: what's going to happen? This is a question that is especially important in horror movies because uncertainty is a key ingredient in invoking anticipation for the next scare, as well as a layer of anxiety around it. Although I could argue the entirety of Halloween is one long buildup of suspense until the final act when Michael and Laurie Strode finally confront one another, but that would literally just be a scene-for-scene breakdown of the entire film. So I'm only going to discuss 3 scenes. The opening scene, the scene where Laurie and Anne are in the car, and the final confrontation between Laurie and Michael. These 3 scenes are prime examples of how John Carpenter's Halloween achieves suspense. The opening scene is easily in the conversation for most infamous scene in a horror movie. I mean, it's an amazing hook for a film, and it sets the stage for what we should expect moving forward. We open on a wide shot of the Myers house, but the quiet sounds of footsteps and glance-like camera movements indicates that this is really a POV shot. This immediately creates suspense as we're asking, who is stalking these teens? And what are their intentions? The unknown person enters through the back door of the kitchen, and we immediately think, oh god, they're in the house. And when they grab the knife, This indicates that their intentions are sinister. Dramatic irony is a tool used in Halloween to amplify the suspense. And it's something I'm gonna keep referring to throughout this video. We know that there's someone in the house with the intent to harm, but the teens in the film are upstairs fooling around with no clue that they're in danger, so we're feeling for what's going to happen to them. The biggest reason why the suspense is dragged out is because the entire opening scene is filmed as a long shot, meaning there's no cuts. We follow this person's POV as they slowly creep through the house with a knife. The boy comes down the stairs unaware of the stalker. To us, he's very clearly in danger, and we're left to watch helplessly to see what's going to happen to him. Yet, the stalker lets him go and proceeds upstairs. The stalker enters the bedroom watching a naked girl brush her hair. This is something Halloween preys on. It takes very intimate, mundane things and adds a voyeur to them. In this case, we're taking the eyes of the stalker and essentially a part of the crime. We're intruding on a naked girl in the privacy of her own room, making us uncomfortable in addition to tense as the stalker gets closer and closer to her. She screams at Michael, answering the question of whose eyes we're watching through. Yet even though that question is answered, our next question is, who's Michael? And obviously the most horrific thing is how Michael murders the girl. As he exits the house, knife still in his hand, our question is what's going to happen next, especially as he approaches a car. Now, this is a twist I rarely hear anybody talk about, but the first ever cut of the film finally reveals Michael to be just a kid.
He's just a kid.
And obviously now you could tell that he just murdered his own sister. And despite that, his blank expression shows us just how remorseless he is about that. Although we have some questions answered, there's still a lot of ambiguity around Michael's actual motivations. We're left to speculate why he commits these murders, and it's that why that makes Michael such a compelling, horrifying, and ruthless killer. Because we'll never know what goes on behind those blank, expressionless eyes. The car scene may be minor, lasting roughly a minute long. Yet it's within the scene's simplicity that demonstrates another great example of how suspense not only amplifies the horror, but also makes an otherwise boring scene more engaging for the audience. Laurie and Anne are casually driving. They're sharing a blunt over some mundane conversation about their plans for babysitting. The shots cut from a front windshield shot to a medium on Laurie and to a medium on Anne. There's nothing too special about these shots, until the scene cuts to a shot of the sanitarium car following them. Dramatic irony is at play once again. We know that Michael Myers is driving the car. We know he has an interest in Laurie after she stopped at the Myers house. And we know he has murderous intentions from the opening scene, and the scene where Loomis stumbles on the dead mechanic whom Michael stole the jumpsuit from. And that's not to mention all of the monologues Loomis has had up until this point on how Michael is pure evil. What we don't know is when or how he's going to strike. Don't Fear the Reaper by the Blue Oyster Cult, which is playing on the radio, is a great song for this moment, as it's about the inevitability of death, and how we must not fear the Grim Reaper. In this case, the girls are literally unaware that the Reaper has marked them for death and is currently following them. Although the medium shots are focusing on Laurie or Anne's dialogue, you could still see the car in the top corner of each shot, reminding us of the danger they're in. Thus, as the girls are casually planning movie marathons and pumpkin carving, we're feeling for their survival. It's actually crazy how Halloween manages to have not one, but two of the most iconic scenes in horror history. It starts with one and ends with another. For me, this sequence starts when Laurie decides to venture across the street to check on her friends in the Wallace house. I feel like a broken record for saying it, but the dramatic irony is a key ingredient for building suspense here. By this point in the film, we know that the Wallace house practically belongs to Michael. In it, he killed Anne, then Bob, and most recently Linda. So we know three things that Laurie doesn't. Her friends are dead, Michael is still in the house, and most importantly, we've seen firsthand how proficient and ruthless Michael is. This puts us on edge as Laurie is walking straight into danger without any preparation for it. What's important to note is that we've been given this key information, but it also doesn't sum up the full picture. For example, we know Michael is in the house, yet we don't know where in the house he actually is. This is what makes Laurie's investigation throughout the house very tense. As she walks through the dark rooms and up the stairs, we know Michael could jump out at any minute. There are also very few cuts in this portion of the sequence. Shots linger for very long, and that also aids in drawing out the tension of the scene. It's also a great way to keep us emotionally connected with Laurie as we're literally with her for every step of the way. She finds all of her friends dead, and displayed like trophies. So this only makes us fear more for her well-being, as we know what's at stake if Michael catches her. And this leads to my favorite shot of the whole movie, and honestly one of the best shots in a horror movie, period. Laurie is crying on the left third of the shot. Naturally, we're drawn to her, but the way the shot is framed is designed to keep us on edge. The majority of the frame is not only empty, but covered in darkness. In the same way we're drawn to Laurie, we're also left to wonder what horrors are lurking in the shadows. And what do you know it? The Shape peeks his head out. Of course, at this point, our fear is at a whole other level, because Michael is right behind Laurie and takes a nice big swing at her. Mind you, this is just the lead up. Now the final confrontation has really begun. Michael is chasing Laurie, but to keep it interesting, the fall Laurie endured has injured her. She can only limp away. So, ambiguity is now replaced by a ticking clock to create suspense. Michael has booby-trapped the house so Laurie can't escape. As Laurie attempts to escape through the kitchen, she cleverly locks the door behind her. Yet she has to force the kitchen door open in order to escape, and she has to do this before Michael could bust through the door. And of course, this is drawn out to the very last second where she very narrowly escapes Michael. This technique is immediately repeated as Laurie exits and is locked out of the Doyle house. As Michael is chasing her, she has to convince the neighbors to help, and when they refuse, she not only has to wake Tommy up, but she has to convince him to open the door as quickly as possible. I love how, despite a maniac trying to kill her, when she enters the house, her instinct is also to protect the children she's looking after. This adds more stakes to the chase as Laurie is not only fighting for her own survival, but now the children's as well. The lights go out, the phone line is cut, Laurie is isolated from any sort of help. And to make matters worse, Michael has now entered the house through a window. Laurie manages to get the upper hand on Michael 2 separate times, but by the time she's stuck in the closet with Michael breaking through, it's just like, how is she going to beat him? The odds are stacked against her, and they really don't make it easy for her. I think that's what makes this chase one of the best ever put to film. In order to survive, Laurie must overcome obstacle after obstacle in a timely manner. It gives her an underdog characteristic, so I can't help but root for her. And this brings us to the last piece of dramatic irony used in the film. Very similar to the hallway shot, a tired Laurie rests on the door. The framing of the shot draws our eyes to Laurie, and as an extension, the room behind her where Michael is laying. She thinks she's won, we think she's won, but then we see Michael sit up like a man possessed. And we watch as Laurie stumbles away with Michael on top of her. Meanwhile, Loomis manages to see the kids running for help, and as Michael strangles Laurie, we're at the edge of our seats waiting for Loomis to arrive before Michael is able to kill Laurie. Luckily, he does arrive in time and puts some shots into Michael, sending him over a railing. And this is one of the best cliffhangers ever. Now that we've established Michael is the boogeyman, pure evil, Loomis takes one last look at Michael's dead body, but he's gone. We close the film on wide shots of the houses, and to the sound of Michael's intense breathing. And in the film's closing moments, we're left to wonder when and where Michael will strike next. We only know that he's still out there, lurking in the shadows, thirsty for blood. He can literally be right behind you. Oh God, he's actually right behind me. No!